October 6th, 1931, 2:17 p.m. Leslie Shumway's hand was shaking as he placed it on the Bible. Federal courtroom, Chicago. 300 people packed into the gallery, every reporter in the city fighting for a seat. And 20 feet away, in a $5,000 custom suit, sat Al Capone, staring, unblinking. Prosecutor Jacob Grossman stood. "Mr. Shumway, whose orders did you take at the Hawthorne smoke shop?" The room went silent. Capone had survived 7 murder indictments. He'd walked away from the St. Valentine's Day massacre. He'd beaten bootlegging charges, weapons charges, conspiracy charges. Bullets couldn't touch him. The Chicago police couldn't stop him. Federal agents couldn't catch him. But 4 words from his own bookkeeper, the man who'd kept his ledgers for 6 years, who knew where every dollar came from. Those 4 words would do what violence never could. They would end a $100 million empire. What nobody knew, what the history books won't tell you, is that 18 months earlier, Leslie Shumway had made a choice in a Miami breakfast room that would change American law enforcement forever. To understand how one terrified accountant brought down the most powerful criminal in American history, you need to understand who Al Capone was in 1930. By 1930, Al Capone wasn't just a gangster. He was Chicago. Annual income, $60 million, nearly $1 billion in today's money. He controlled everything. Bootlegging operations supplying thousands of speakeasies, gambling halls that never closed, prostitution rings, labor unions, politicians, judges, cops. If it made money in Chicago, Capone took his cut. He ran his empire from the Lexington Hotel, 10 floors of luxury serving as his fortress. 600 to 700 men worked for him. The Chicago outfit wasn't a gang, it was a corporation. Capone was the CEO of crime. February 14th, 1929. The St. Valentine's Day massacre. 7 men lined up against a brick wall in a North Side garage. Machine gunned to death. Everyone knew Capone ordered it. Nobody could prove it. That was the problem. Capone seemed untouchable. Never filed a tax return. Never had a bank account. Never signed anything. Paid cash for everything. Owned nothing in his name. When police came, witnesses disappeared. When prosecutors built cases, evidence vanished. When feds raided warehouses, Capone knew hours before. He'd bought half the Chicago Police Department. The other half was too scared to move. President Herbert Hoover reportedly ordered, "Get Capone." But how do you catch a ghost? Enter the T-Men, Treasury Department Special Intelligence Unit, led by Elmer Eyre, a quiet, methodical bureaucrat, the opposite of everything Capone represented. No flash, no headlines, just patience. Eyre had a strategy nobody else considered. Follow the money. 1927, the Supreme Court ruled in United States v. Sullivan. Even illegal income is taxable. Bootleggers, gangsters, anyone making money from crime had to pay taxes. If they didn't, that was tax evasion, a federal crime, no statute of limitations. April 1930. Ralph Capone, Al's older brother, convicted of tax evasion. 18 months in federal prison. The family was vulnerable, but Al was smarter, more careful. He left no trail. May 1930. Frank J. Wilson arrived in Chicago from Baltimore. Age 42. Former accountant. Reputation for obsessive thoroughness. Elmer Eyre said. He fears nothing that walks. He will sit quietly looking at books 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, forever, if he wants to find something. A criminal Wilson interrogated said, "He sweats ice water." Wilson's mission was impossible. Prove Capone had income over $5,000, the standard deduction. Find records connecting money to Capone personally. Protect witnesses from assassination. If Capone learned someone was talking, they ended up in the Chicago River. But Wilson had one advantage Capone didn't know about. Every criminal empire has a weakness. Capone's weakness was a 35-year-old bookkeeper named Leslie Shumway. Shumway worked at the Hawthorne Smoke Shop in Cicero since 1924. Surface level, a cigar store. Walk through the front, buy a Cuban, walk out. The back room held something else. Roulette tables, craps games, blackjack, poker, horse racing bets called in by phone, 40 to 50 employees around the clock, annual profits over $200,000, over $3 million today. Leslie Shumway kept the books. Every night, he recorded the take from each game. End of each month, he calculated net profit, then divided it according to Capone's instructions. 60% to A, 20% to Ralph, 10% to Pete, 10% to town, payoffs to police and politicians. Shumway was meticulous, occupational hazard for accountants. He recorded everything: daily takes, monthly distributions, who got what, when, how much. One page read, Frank paid $17,500 for Al. A perfect paper trail. If anyone could find it, decode it, get Shumway to admit what it meant. But Shumway lived in constant fear. He'd seen what happened to people who crossed Capone, seen the bodies. He earned good money keeping ledgers, but knew too much, could never leave. If he tried, Capone would assume he was talking. If Capone assumed you were talking, you died. By 1930, Shumway was tired. Tired of looking over his shoulder. Tired of wondering if today was the day. Ralph's conviction scared everyone in the inner circle. The feds were closing in. Every lieutenant asked at night, "Am I next?" While Shumway worried 200 miles away in Chicago, Frank Wilson was drowning in documents. What Wilson discovered late one night in fall 1930 would connect him to Shumway in a way neither man could imagine. Fall 1930. Late night. Frank Wilson sat alone in his Treasury office in Chicago, surrounded by boxes, 2 million documents, seized from raids over 6 years, hotel bills, receipts, bank statements. Most led nowhere. Capone was too careful. Wilson was exhausted. 18 hours reviewing documents. His eyes burned, but he kept going. That's what separated Wilson from other investigators. He never stopped. He opened another box. Ledgers from the state attorney's office. 3 bound leather books. Unremarkable. He almost passed them over. Started reviewing. Columns for craps. 21. Roulette. Horse. Gambling records. Every few pages. Calculations. Net profit divided to A. Ralph. Pete. Town. Then, page 83. 5 words that changed everything. Frank paid $17,500 for Al. Wilson read it 5 times. Direct evidence. Money going to Al. Not an organization. Not a front company. To Al. This had to be Capone. The Hawthorne Smoke Shop ledgers. Wilson recognized the operation. But who wrote them? 3 weeks. Wilson collected handwriting samples, voter registers, bank deposits, bail bond certificates, every known Capone associate. Finally, a match. A deposit slip from a small Cicero bank. Leslie A. Shumway. But where was he? Wilson turned to E. J. O'Hare, lawyer who ran the Hawthorne Kennel Club dog track. O'Hare was connected to Capone, but had reasons for helping the feds. The connection was becoming dangerous. O'Hare identified Shumway. Current location: Miami. Working at a dog track. Spring 1931. Wilson traveled to Miami, found Shumway's home address, planned the approach carefully. He knew Shumway was terrified of Capone. This wasn't about threats. It was about leverage. Morning. Shumway at home with family. Wilson and 2 agents knocked. Shumway answered. "Mr. Shumway, we need you to come with us." His face went white. "I'm with Treasury. We need to talk about your work in Chicago." The car ride to Miami Federal Building was silent. Wilson broke it. "We have the ledgers. We have your handwriting. We know you worked for Capone." Shumway didn't look at him. "I don't know what you're talking about." Wilson leaned forward. "Let me explain your situation. Inside the federal building, Wilson laid it out. We can prove you kept records of illegal gambling. That makes you an accessory. You're facing federal charges unless you cooperate. But there's another option. You testify. We protect you. You start fresh somewhere else. The unspoken part hung in the air. If word got out, Capone would kill him either way. Shumway knew Capone had a $25,000 contract on Wilson's life, knew what happened to traitors. But if the feds had the ledgers, Capone already suspected something was wrong. His choice is prison, death by Capone, or witness protection. 3 hours later, Shumway broke, signed an affidavit describing the Hawthorne operation. The key statement: I took orders relating to the business from Mr. Alphonse Capone. He identified A as Alphonse Capone in the ledgers, confirmed profit distributions, amounts, dates, everything. Within hours, Treasury agents relocated Shumway to California. Hidden location, new identity temporarily. Shumway lived in constant fear. Wilson needed corroboration. One witness wasn't enough. He identified Fred Reese, alias J. C. Dunbar. Reese handled cash drops, bags of money from gambling delivered directly to Capone. Reese had bought $300,000 in cashier's checks. Money went straight to Capone. The Secret Six, wealthy Chicago businessmen, funded Reese's protection. They wanted Capone stopped. He was hurting legitimate business. They paid for a boat trip to Uruguay. Reese would stay safe until trial. Capone learned the investigation was advancing. Put out contracts on Wilson, at least $25,000. Wilson never carried a gun, but had 24-hour protection. Capone tried bribing the jury. Successfully. At first, Treasury sent undercover agent Michael Malone to infiltrate the organization. Malone posed as a Philadelphia thug, stayed at the Lexington Hotel, reported everything. March through June 1931, Wilson assembled evidence, proving Capone's lavish spending, $8,000 suits, Miami mansion, custom furniture, total non-deductible expenses, $116,000. If spending that much, he had to have income. June 1931, grand jury hearing. Shumway testified, nervous, protected by federal agents. June 16, 1931. Capone indicted on 23 counts of tax evasion. Tax owed, $215,000 plus $164,000 in penalties. Years covered, 1924 to 1929. Capone initially pled guilty, expected a deal, 2.5 years. Judge James Wilkerson rejected the plea deal. Capone changed his plea to not guilty. Trial set for October 6, 1931. The trial began. Capone arrived confident. He'd bribed the entire jury. His lawyers were the best money could buy. What Capone didn't know was that Judge Wilkerson had discovered the bribes. And at the last possible moment, Wilkerson did something unprecedented. October 6, 1931. Federal Courthouse, Chicago. Over 300 people fighting to get inside. Reporters from every major newspaper. Camera flashes. The crowd pushed against the courtroom doors. Inside, Al Capone sat in a $5,000 suit, smiling, confident. His legal team, 3 of the best criminal defense attorneys money could buy, surrounded him. Judge James Wilkerson took the bench. He knew something Capone didn't. Capone had bribed the entire jury panel, every single juror. Wilkerson had discovered it days earlier, but he'd said nothing. He let Capone believe he was safe. Down the hall, another courtroom had a jury in session for a different case. Just before proceedings began, Wilkerson made his move. "Bailiff, bring in the jury from Judge Edwards' courtroom." Confusion swept the courtroom. Capone's face dropped. His attorney jumped to his feet. "Your Honor, what's happening?" Wilkerson's voice was calm. "I'm switching the juries. These jurors will be sequestered. New jury, hand-picked, no connection to Capone. Sequestered so the gang couldn't reach them." In one move, Wilkerson stripped away Capone's main defense. Capone whispered urgently to his lawyers. His bribe money, wasted. For the first time, he realized he might actually lose. Day 1. Day 2. The prosecution presented evidence of Capone's lavish spending. Witnesses testified about custom suits, $1,500 each. He'd bought dozens. Furniture purchases, $26,000 for his Miami home. A $7,000 diamond belt for his wife. May. Phone bills, $2,000 annually. A massive sum in the 1930s. Hotel stays, always penthouse suites. The logic was simple. If Capone was spending over $100,000, he had to have income. Yet he'd filed no tax returns, claimed he had no income. The prosecution was establishing tax evasion through lifestyle evidence. Chester Bragg took the stand. Ordinary citizen who participated in a raid on the Hawthorne smoke shop. He testified Capone arrived during the raid. Bragg was guarding the door while others loaded gambling equipment into trucks. Capone tried to push past him. Bragg asked, "What the hell? Do you think this is a party?" Capone's response, caught on record, "I'm the owner of this place." Direct admission of ownership. Reverend Henry Hoover testified next. He'd led the citizens' raid. Said Capone confronted him. Capone complained, "Why are you fellows always picking on me?" Then warned, "This is the last raid you'll ever pull." More evidence Capone controlled the gambling operations. The prosecutors were building a foundation. Each witness added another piece. But everyone in that courtroom knew the case would live or die with one man. Leslie Shumway, the bookkeeper who kept the records, the man who could decode the ledgers, the insider who took orders from Capone himself. October 6th, 2:15 p.m. The prosecution calls Leslie Shumway. The courtroom went silent. Shumway walked to the witness stand, visibly nervous. His hand shook as he placed it on the Bible. He made eye contact with Capone. Terrible mistake. Capone's stare was cold, calculating, promising consequences. Prosecutor Jacob Grossman established Shumway's role. Worked at Hawthorne Smoke Shop from 1924 to 1926. Kept financial records of gambling operations. Recorded daily takes, monthly profits, distributions. The 3 bound ledgers were entered as evidence. Shumway confirmed the handwriting was his. He explained the system. Columns for different games. Net profit calculated monthly. A represented Alphonse Capone. Ralph was Ralph Capone. Pete was Pete Penovich. Town meant payments for police and political protection. Grossman asked the critical question. "Mr. Shumway, whose orders did you take at the Hawthorne smoke shop?" Long pause. Shumway glanced at Capone again. Capone stared back, unblinking. The courtroom held its breath. "Mr. Alphonse Capone." 4 words. Capone's face remained expressionless, but everyone knew. The empire just cracked. Shumway continued. Estimated $550,000 in profit over 2 years. Confirmed Capone received 1/6, approximately $92,000 per year, far over the $5,000 taxable threshold. Grossman asked. "Did you have any conversation with Al Capone about carrying money?" Shumway answered. "Al asked me what I would do if I got stuck up, and I told him I would just let them take it. And he says, 'That is right.'" Casual conversation confirming Capone's control. The defense tried to shake him. Suggested he was coerced, implied his memory was faulty, but the ledgers didn't lie. The handwriting matched. The numbers were clear. Shumway held firm. Fred Reese testified next via affidavit, still in Uruguay. Confirmed money flow from gambling to Capone. Bank witnesses testified about large cash deposits. Western Union officials confirmed wire transfers to the Capone family. October 8th. The prosecution introduced a letter from Capone's tax attorney, Lawrence Mattingly, written earlier, offering to settle Capone's tax debt. Mattingly had admitted Capone had income over $100,000 in 1928 and 1929. The defense objected furiously. Judge allowed it. Admission of guilt. Capone's own lawyer had admitted his client had unreported income. After 9 days of testimony, the case went to the jury. Capone still believed his lawyers would find a way. They always had before. But on October 18th, 1931, at 3:47 p.m., everything changed. October 18th, 1931, 3:47 p.m. The jury returned after 8 hours of deliberation. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Capone sat motionless. Judge Wilkerson asked, "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman stood. "We have, Your Honor. Count 1, 1924 taxes guilty. Count 2, 1925 taxes guilty. Count 3, 1926 taxes guilty. Count 4, 1927 taxes not guilty. Count 5, 1928 taxes guilty. Count 6, 1929 taxes guilty. 5 guilty verdicts, enough to put him away." Capone's face remained blank, but his hands gripped the armrests. For the first time in his life, money and violence couldn't save him. The most powerful criminal in America had been beaten by a bookkeeper and an accountant. November 24th, 1931. Sentencing. Judge Wilkerson sentenced Capone to 11 years in federal prison, a $50,000 fine, $7,692 in court costs, and $215,000 plus interest on back taxes. The largest penalty ever levied on a taxpayer at that time. Capone would serve in Atlanta, then transfer to Alcatraz in 1934. Leslie Shumway disappeared into witness protection. Treasury relocated him under a new identity. He lived in constant fear for the rest of his life. Never returned to Chicago. Last known location, somewhere on the West Coast. He died in obscurity. The man who destroyed an empire. Frank Wilson's case made his career. 1936. He left the IRS and became chief of the U.S. Secret Service. Created security protocols for presidents still used today. Retired 1947. Died 1970 at age 83. Remembered as the greatest forensic accountant in history. Later solved the Lindbergh baby kidnapping case using similar techniques. Fred Reese returned from Uruguay after the trial. Testified at other mob trials. Eventually settled into a quiet life, protected by the government for years. Al Capone entered Atlanta Penitentiary in 1932. Transferred to Alcatraz in 1934, among the first prisoners sent there. Syphilis ravaged his mind. Paroled 1939 after 7 years, mentally broken. By 1946, he had the mentality of a 12-year-old child. He lived in his Miami mansion, secluded, confused. Died January 25, 1947, age 48, stroke and pneumonia. The man who ruled Chicago died unable to remember his own empire. The impact rippled through organized crime. Every mob boss in America suddenly worried about taxes. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division expanded dramatically. Follow the money became standard law enforcement strategy. Waxy Gordon, tax evasion, 10 years. Johnny Torrio, tax evasion, 2.5 years. Moses Annenberg, tax evasion, 3 years. Nucky Johnson, tax evasion, 10 years. United States v. Capone established pretextual prosecution. When you can't prove violent crimes, prove financial crimes. Tax evasion became a weapon against organized crime. Money laundering laws evolved from this case. The Bank Secrecy Act of 1970 traced its roots to the Capone case. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division today uses the same techniques Wilson pioneered. Forensic accounting became standard in financial crimes. Every major RICO case involves financial investigators. Recent examples: FIFA corruption, the Silk Road online drug ring. The principle remains: criminals must spend money, and spending leaves trails. Capone lost because of arrogance. He believed he was untouchable, underestimated boring government accountants, thought violence and corruption were enough, failed to understand numbers don't lie, papers don't forget. The ledgers he insisted be kept to manage his empire destroyed him. Shumway wasn't a hero or a villain, just a man who kept books and wanted to survive. His testimony changed American law enforcement, but he paid with a lifetime looking over his shoulder. The final irony: Capone survived gang wars, murder charges, police raids. He was defeated by mathematics, patience, and a bookkeeper's conscience. The most dangerous weapon isn't the gun, it's the paper trail. October 6th, 1931. Leslie Shumway took the stand. 4 words: Mr. Alphonse Capone. The empire fell not to bullets, but to bookkeeping. Every transaction leaves a trace. Every payment has a record. Every empire, no matter how powerful, can be undone by the person keeping track of the money. In the end, you can't get away from a bookkeeper who knows where the money goes.